This conference will now be recorded.
Perfect. So, do we have any doubts, query, concerns until what we covered yesterday?
No.
Are we all good, sorted? Malishwari, this is your first session, or you were there in yesterday's session too? Hello, Malishwari, can you hear me? All right, no problem. I'll quickly be sharing my screen. Let me know once you all can see the screen, please. Screen share. Yeah, is the screen visible now?
Yes.
All right, sorry. So until yesterday, we discussed about what is the scope, right? Why we go for scope and stuff. What are the myths about testing? Why testing is considered as boring, non-boring, and stuff, right? So we also discussed about the matrix, what exactly your career path would look like 2 years down the line, 5 years down the line, 7, 8, and 11 years, right? And then we also discussed about what are the different areas that you can focus on once you become, or let's say once you start your career into testing, and then if in case you want to switch jobs, you can go into all these fields, right? Now today we are majorly we'll be emphasizing on software development lifecycle, right? So generally, what exactly software development lifecycle and its different models are. Have we all heard of life cycle of a human life cycle? Can anyone explain what exactly human life cycle is? If
From
in case, how
baby
does
to
it?
a toddler.
Hmm.
Sorry. From baby to
Yeah,
a
go ahead.
toddler to a preteen to a teen to adulthood.
And
That's it. And then you die.
exactly, right. So that's how it goes. So first thing first, you go ahead, you are a toddler, right?
Hmm.
First thing first, you go ahead, you are a toddler, right? Maybe baby, then age, you get mature. At 15, at let's say 18, you complete your schooling. 18 to 22, you enter into college phase. After that, you get into job. 30, 35, somewhere you get married. I mean, just taking a hypothetical situation, which like 80% of people do. And then after that, you go into parenthood, all sort of responsibilities going ahead. You turn 60, retire, and then after that, your retirement phase starts. And then by God's grace, all of us have to wrap up the world, so we go ahead and get that thing done. So starting from point A to point B, this is your point A, this is your point B, right? The journey goes like 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. There are different
Hmm.
phases that also comes in between 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? You call it pre-age, you call it maturity, then office, marriage, wife, kids, retirement, and then finally you wrap up the world, right? There are different stages. And in the same way, software development also has different stages in it, and that those kind of stages is what we basically call as software development lifecycle, right?
Right.
Allow me a moment. Perfect. All right, let's go ahead and check this out. Software development lifecycle. So SDLC is basically called a software development lifecycle. It is a sequence of activities that are basically carried out by developers for designing and developing a good quality software. Now, why do you think the process is important, right? Anyone want to say why processes are important? Why do you think we need there was a requirement of software development lifecycle or SDLC model?
Because you can't go
Um,
from one to the other without a
exactly.
process.
Absolutely. So for today, we are going to discuss SDLC, which is Software Development Life Cycle Model, right? And its phases. So as we said that to cook out something as well, right? For example, you want to cook out some meals in the kitchen. How do you go ahead by that? For example, let's say you want to cook oats meal. For cooking a roast meal or for cooking out your favorite dish, maybe let's say chicken, veg, anything. For an oats meal, for example, you need oats, you need maybe milk and some fresh vegetables or etc. etc. You go ahead, chop the vegetables first, then you go ahead, boil them, sprinkle some salt and water to it, spices and whatnot according to your taste buds. Then go ahead, get the oats, boil them, mix both the two substances, and then keep it on slight flame for 5 minutes, and then the oatmeal gets cooked. Right? Simple. But behind the scenes, there are a lot of processes that goes ahead: chopping, getting the things ready, making stuff all together, assembling all the stuffs. Right? So all those things behind the scenes are the different cycles the product has to go through. The same way, when you are developing a good quality software, it has to go through a cycle of development, right? And that cycle of development is basically called as software development life cycle. So again, reiterating the definition, software development lifecycle is a sequence of activities which are basically carried out by the developers for designing and developing a good quality software, right? Now
Right.
there are different models involved in SDLC, right? Just like I'll take the example, guys. I'll be taking the example of cooking along with this SDLC, right? So the very first thing that you have in your mind is you were cooking out something in the kitchen, right? So when you cook out something in the kitchen, what exactly you have is firstly you tried, let's say, fried vegetable. Second time you air fried that. This is just kind of related, right? Or maybe you use a little less oil. Someone said, hey, the oil is too much in the first time. Go ahead, use a little less oil. You use a little less oil.
Right.
Third time someone recommended, go ahead, use some healthy substance. You replace the normal oil with olive oil, right? Someone else gave some recommendations, you kept on improvising them, right? So based on the requirement and the taste buds, you cook different things, right? In the same
Right.
way, based on the different models or based on the product knowledge, product understanding or requirements, we go ahead and choose different models that are suitable and feasible for the organizational's benefit.
Mhm.
All right, so there are different models that we'll be going through. Number one is waterfall. So if I talk about, we have is waterfall, incremental, spiral, and then we have V model, we have agile. But to be very honest, whatever are in like in the interview preparations, if we talk about waterfall is something that people ask. V is also sometimes that is being asked and agile, right? It's important to have an understanding of incremental and spiral, but these terminologies are majority when it comes to interview stuff, right? So now moving on to what exactly the software development lifecycle is and what are the different phases behind that. Now there are different phases between software development lifecycle. Like each and every time the software has to go through different phases, then only the software basically is ready to be launched in the market. Now what are those different phases? First phase is requirement analysis. Then we have is designing phase, then we have coding phase, testing phase, deployment phase, and operations and maintenance phase. Now let's try and understand the requirement phase first. Now what do you think? Just take an example of people coming to your home, right? You invited, let's say, 10-15 guests, and there's a discussion going on at your home. Hey, what should we cook? Because someone loves something else, someone loves something else, right? For example, Noreen, I love let's say oatmeal, right? You like chicken. There's some other person, let's say Maleshwari, if you are on the call, perfect. You like something South Indian, right? And then Nagina likes something else. So what exactly happens is, and you all are invited at my place. Just taking a random situation, right? I, with my family, am deciding, hey, some people like this, that, what all you like. How exactly are we going to cook all these things, right? What are we doing here? We are understanding the requirements, right? We are gathering all the requirements that some person love X food, some love Y, some love Z. we are gathering those requirements, we are understanding and analyzing the requirements, right? The same way we have to understand and analyze the requirement of different clients, or you can
Right.
say stakeholders, right? Or you can say people who invest into you and want the good quality software. Agreed?
Mm-hmm.
Now, this particular phase is called as the requirement analysis phase. Now, for example, let's talk about Mintra, right? There might be the person one who invested a lot of money, and then he specifically wants, hey, I want login page like this. Someone other person came, he wants, hey, I want search like this. Some other person said, I want Mintra logo here, men, women section and stuff, right? So we all gathered together and understood all the requirements. All right. So the requirements for Mintra, what what were different requirements, right? I said login. Someone else also recommended logout. Then we wanted registration. Then search, checkout, and then add to cart, etc., etc., right? And there could be n number of requirements. There was also one requirement, let's say, which is not feasible. For example, uh, delivering orders through. Let me just write it down. Another requirement came was delivering order through drones. Another was delivering orders through flying robots. Could be anything, right? There are n number of requirements that comes in. Now, not every requirement can be finalized, correct? Because different client with different stakeholders, we only have to select those requirements that are feasible to develop, that are feasible to deliver at a defined amount of time. Agreed? Yes or no?
Yes.
Right. So the same way we went ahead and we decided that what next phase should be. The next phase is designing phase, right? In the same way we have another phase wherein we call as designing phase. Now what happens in designing phase? Out of these 1,000 requirements, let's say we have 1,000 requirements, right? Out of these 1,000 requirements, we do a lot of brainstorming, right? We again sit with the client, we sit with the team management and stuff. Then we decide, hey, all right, so these requirements are fine. We can go ahead with it. It's a go ahead. But if I talk about this, it's a no go, right? Because delivering through drones is not possible. It's a no go, right? So out of these
Right.
1,500 requirements are finalized, and then we prepare a document, right? We prepare a document. That document is basically called as software requirement specification, right? Now, what exactly is that? That is a requirement specification document that has all set of requirements, right? Everything is written in that. Now, in
What
this
is
particular
SRS?
SRS is software requirement specification.
Oh, okay.
SRS basically means which has all the set of requirements that needs to be developed, right? It has thousand
Okay.
sets in it, but not everything is feasible, right? So what we do in design phasing is we go ahead and prepare SDD, that is software design description.
Right.
So SDD basically is software design description. You can go ahead and consider it that way, that you convert the requirements into one specific component or into one specific document, which we basically call as design description, right? So if you go ahead in the designing phase, we create a high level document, right, in which all the requirements are gathered, mentioned for the team reference, right? And those requirements are basically called as software design description, requirements to be converted into technical terms, like, hey, we'll be going to develop this, we will be going to develop that. So out of those 1,500 requirements are finalized, and then we again prepare a document SDD, that is software design description, which is basically used by the dev team to refer and start the development, right? Now once your requirements are finalized, right, once you have selected 500 out of 1,000 and then 500 requirements are finalized, then comes up is your coding phase. Now what exactly happens in coding phase is I hope by the name it says the development of software actually starts. Right? We primarily go ahead and start with the development of software. We finalize what technology we use, right? Which finalize what technology we use, who will do what, right? What tech stack we need to use, which platform we need to use, what all, how many team members we need, etc. Right? Once all the things are finalized, we go ahead and start the development. So that once the coding phase is done, then the next phase comes is testing phase, right? Now you have developed something, for example, let's understand all this and then I'll give you a very brief example of the kitchen and the household work that we just discussed, right? Now comes up the testing phase. As the name suggests, you will be testing the software, thorough testing of the software, right? Then fifth phase is deployment. Deployment is you provide the software to be used by end user. That means you launch the software in the market. And then second is operation and maintenance, right? What does that means? You go ahead and perform some operations or you can say some maintenance part in it. Now let's try and relate all this with the example of cooking food at home, right? For example, someone is throwing a party at home. There are thousands of guests invited. Not thousand, let's say 15. Right. The first
Yeah.
thing that you discuss is, hey, I'll be cooking out idli, sambar, vada, dosa, and then maybe some part of veg, some part of non-veg and stuff, right? So we go ahead and start preparing those, right? But now we got to know that 80% people are vegetarian, right? Then cooking out whole 80% people are veg. Cooking out 10 non-veg items would be a waste of time and waste of food as well. So instead of 10, you went ahead and you selected two, let's say X and Y, right? These two dishes you finalized, you cooked that. So that was a requirement phase wherein you went ahead and you performed the requirement analysis, right? Second thing you did was selecting a few dishes and removing a few dishes that cannot be cooked. Now that particular phase came in as designing phase, right? You selected 2 out of 10 and then you cooked that. Third thing was coding phase. Coding is equal to cooking the food at home, right? You are developing the food, you are developing what, how you want to cook it, at what flame you want to cook it, what are the different spices, etc. and stuff you're going to add, right? Once that is done, then you do not serve the food directly to the customers, right? You first make a taste of it. Now, once you taste that, that means you are testing the food. If the testing looks good, you go ahead and then serve to the relatives or your guests. Now, once the testing or tasting of the food is done, you go ahead and serve the food, which means you are deploying the software or the food to the end user for them to use. Now, for example, the six phases operation and maintenance. For example, some person gave a comment that, hey, Noreen, the food is okay, but there is a slight salt added to it, or there is no salt added in the food. Then they will come back to you. You will take the dish back again, do some hit and trial on it, and then serve back again, right? There are
Right.
instances where things happens, where mistakes happens from us. The same way, operation and maintenance phase in software is something that is being considered, wherein we go ahead and do certain stuff. For example, we go ahead and do certain stuff. For example, bugs, if we have any, right, that are reported by the end user. Then we have enhancements, if any, that are reported by the end user, and then we have security enhancements. You all might be using WhatsApp, right? In the initial days when WhatsApp was there, there was no feature of blue tick, right? One second. So there was no feature of blue tick. There was no feature of sending images with one-time view, right? There was no feature of removing blue tick or maybe deleting the images sent, right? Or
Right.
maybe payment using WhatsApp, right? So all these features were not there initially. Now, from where did all these features came from? All these features primarily came from the operation and maintenance phase, right? So all the features basically come from operation and maintenance phase because we are going ahead and discussing that particular enhancements. We are doing some security checks in the application and then we are deploying back to the end user. So that's how those are the basic six principles or 6 points that goes ahead for software development lifecycle. Any doubts, guys? I hope we are all okay with it, right?
Yeah.
Got your point. Let's go back again and understand what are the different models in that. So as I already suggested or told, there are different models in this. First thing first, we are going to start with this waterfall model. Now, anyone who want to take a guess on what exactly the waterfall or water means to you? Can anyone try to make a guess on it? Now let's have a look at this, right? This, for example, I'll just tell you what exactly waterfall is. Now let's try and understand these. This is what these are the different stages, right? Right. Let's try and understand that these are different stages, right? And you are standing here. I don't know how can I draw you, but for example, you are standing here and you have a water in your hand, or maybe you have a glass in your hand, and you pour some water on step one. What do you think will happen?
It'll fall.
It will fall. And how will the fall start? First, it will complete this one, then it will complete this particular area, then it will complete this particular area, then this particular area, and slowly, gradually, it will fall on the floor, correct?
Yes.
In the same way, we have one of the design models that we primarily go ahead and call as waterfall model. Now, what does that waterfall model calls out for? That particular waterfall model calls out for, that's perfect, right? Right? This is what we primarily go ahead and call as waterfall model. If on the right side you can see that, right? So waterfall model
Mhm.
has the first phase as requirement analysis. The phases are also going to be the same, guys. There is no changes that we are going to see. First thing is requirement analysis. Then second is what we decided, requirement analysis. Second phase what we had is design. Third is coding. Then we have is testing. Then we have is deployment, and then the last we have is maintenance, right? So this particular phase, if you talk about, is requirement analysis. So as Noreen, you already mentioned and you already stated that if we go ahead, have the water flow from part 1 to part 3, part 4, part 5, part 6, and then it goes to the end user, right?
Right.
So what exactly, this is how exactly the waterfall model is. First stage, as I already stated, is analysis. This is stage 1, this is stage 2, 3, right? Ignore the cursive colors, 5, right? And then you can add one more stage and you can give it as stage 6, right? So all these stages are 6. Now just tell me, if you for like throw a water will be coming out like this, right? Can water go up like this on stairs?
No.
No, right? The same way we have waterfall model, which primarily states that water will start flowing from step 1 to step 2. In the same way, your development will start happening from step 1. Everything will be completed in step 1, then only it will go to step 2. Once everything is completed in step 2, then only it will land to step 3. Once this area of step 3 is covered, then only it comes to step 4, right? And once step 4 is done, then it falls to step 5 here like this, and once this is done, then it falls to step 6. Once step 6 is done, the software is ready to be launched in the market. Well, I hope you all agree to it.
Yes.
Perfect. Now, the same way we have some positives and negatives about waterfall model. Now, what exactly, when to use waterfall model, right? When can we, and just remember one thing, right? If anyone tells you in the s- company that, hey, how you are using the waterfall model, you are simply gonna say that waterfall model is always a bottom down, or you can say top down, top bottom approach, right? As in, you start from step one and you go till the end. You can never have this way, right? It will always be this way is not possible. However, this is always feasible and possible. This is correct, this is not correct. That in layman terms basically means you cannot jump to step 3 unless and until step 1 and step 2 are completed thoroughly, right? You cannot start testing and then and unless development is done, because testing phase lies here, development phase lies here. Once the
Right.
entire development is done, then only it will come to testing, right? And if in case, for example, guys, you found any issue, can you go back? Noreen, what's your call?
Can,
For example, you found some issue in the testing phase. Can you go back?
I was gonna ask actually. I don't think you
Oh,
can, right?
exactly. So as the practical examples, whatever we have discussed, we are not allowed to go back, right? We have to go ahead with the same issue in the forward, then in forward, and then we have to launch that particular software in the market having those same issues, considering the fact that we inform the client that, hey, we are launching the product with so and so issues, don't worry, we will be finalizing and fixing them in the next release, right? If they agree to it, fair enough. If they don't agree to it, then we have to understand or go ahead or make them analyze in some or the other fashion,
Okay.
right? Now, when to use waterfall model? When the requirements are not changing frequently. Now, what do you mean by when requirements are not changing frequently? Anyone wants to make a guess on it?
What was the question?
When to use
No.
waterfall model? We use
Oh,
waterfall model when the requirements don't change frequently. Now, why do you think requirements should not change for waterfall model to be used? Any idea? Any guess? Let's say
um,
if they change and we go back,
if they change frequently, then we can't really keep going back and forth. It has to go
exactly.
from one.
It has to go from one point to the other point, right? So that's the
Yeah.
reason why we primarily go ahead and state that requirements has to be finalized before even
Right.
going to step one, right? So if you have to finalize all the given set of requirements, if the requirements are you have to finalize the requirements here at step one only. Once the requirements are finalized, then only you proceed to step two, then step three, step four, right?
Right.
Application should
I,
not be
I
com
I do have a question.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Um, During the requirement phase, which I'm guessing is probably the longest phase, if we show the client what we've done and what we've designed with the requirements that they've given us, and they don't like it, we do have to go back and change it, right?
No, in requirement analysis phase, you will never be showing the client what you have done, right? Because that is a
Okay.
very step one. You have not
Okay.
even developed, you have not even finalized the requirements. This is a phase where you sit with the client, understand what they need, put your feet into their shoes and try to see the problem. You give
Okay.
them solutions, you try to understand what they actually want, right? Basis those finalizations, you start developing. Development phase
Okay.
is the third step, right? You cannot show the product that you have developed. Why? Because you have not started any development so far.
Okay.
I hope you got my point.
Yes.
Perfect, right? Then now, coming to the point wherein what exactly are the requirements should be stable. We all agree to the fact that requirement has to be stable, because if the requirement is stable, then only we'll be going ahead and understanding what the client needs, right? Trained resources. We do not have much time to train the resources in the given time, right? You have to understand that time goes very fast. All you need is good quality people who can develop the given prototype, given software in a defined or a desired amount of time, right? So what we basically land up in software in waterfall model is requirement should be clear, because if they are not clear, we cannot go back. Shorter project duration, maybe that's a can be a call, cannot be a call. Requirement should be clear. So there are three things that you need to understand, right? Without going much into the deep analysis. Now let's say if I go ahead, if you want to note it down, you can. Although notes would be given, requirement should be clear, right? First thing first, requirement should not be complex and big, right? Third thing, trained resources. So resources should be trained, requirement should be this. You
What does that mean? Resources should be trained?
trained resources, as in, like, for example, Noreen, you are into testing, right? You should know what exactly you need to test. If you are into automation, you should know the language. Like if we are testing using JavaScript, Java, C Sharp, anything. If I'm into
Okay.
development, I should know what technology I'm going to use, right? For example, if I have
Okay.
to use Java, I should know how to write a code in Java. That's what we basically call as trained resources. So that means each and every person should be proficient in their own work.
Okay.
Yeah. You cannot go back to the previous phase if in case there is any error in the current phase, right? We cannot go back into the previous phase if there is any error in the current phase, as simple as that. And then everything comes up with pros and cons, right? So we cannot have a negatives and a positive. Just like the coin has two sides, if you flip the coin, one is head, one is tail. The same way, every model has its advantages and then disadvantages. Now let's discuss the advantage first. Before the next phase is completed, each phase must be completed, right? Before the next phase development goes, each phase must be completed. That means
Mhm.
if in case I want to go from step 1 to step 2, my step 1 should be completed, right? This has to be completed thoroughly, then only I'll be able to go this. Then once this is completed, I'll go to this. Once this is done, then this. Once this is done, then this, and then the product goes into the market. First thing. Second thing is it is suitable for the projects where the requirements are clear. Now, absolutely apt. Requirement has to be very clear. Only then you will be able to develop the product. The project is completely dependent on the project team with minimal client interaction. Right? Three points that you need to understand: one, two, and three. Majority. Project is completely dependent on the project team with minimum client interaction. What does that mean? You are having a client interaction here, right? This is the point wherein you are having a client interaction. Why? Because you are finalizing the requirements. Now, once your requirements are finalized, you will never see the client in the entire journey. Client is
Oh.
sitting here.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
client then sits here. In this particular product or model, client then sits here. Why? Because now client becomes what? Now client becomes the end user. If
Okay.
in case you can relate it, now client becomes the end user who is waiting for the product to be shown by you. That means whatever you have developed so far. So Noreen, what you were saying, that can we show the product to the client whatever we have developed so far? That's not the case. Now the client will be able to see the product whatever you have developed in this particular journey, right? Client's work
Okay.
completes here itself, and then they go ahead and they sit back here. You cannot go back to the client again in this, right? So we are not allowed to show the requirement phase, right? Once the entire
Okay.
stuff is done, then we showcase the client at the release phase, right? If you all remember,
All right.
operation and maintenance deployment phase, that's wherein the
Mm-hmm.
client comes into play, and then we show the same stuff to the client.
Okay.
All right. Now this was your advantages. Now everything has disadvantages too. Errors can be fixed only during phase one. That's absolutely true. If in case there is certain error in phase one, if I have an error here, I cannot go back and check that again. I have to go through the entire cycle journey and then only the error can be resolved. Second issue is not desirable for complex project because if the requirements are not clear, you cannot go ahead and change the format. Documentation is huge, right? It does take a lot of time for development. Testing period comes quite late than development. Any
Right.
guesses around that?
Testing period comes quite late in the development process.
See, we are.
No, I have nothing. Sorry.
No problem. So we are at step one, right? We are at requirement analysis phase, then we are at design phase, then we become go to development phase, then we go to testing phase, correct? So once the
Yes.
entire development is done, once your entire food is cooked, then only you can go ahead and taste the food, right? You cannot taste the food in parallel. What does that mean? If there is any glitch, if there is addition of salt in the food, you have to recook the entire food again, or you have to
Right.
do some hit and trial, some mixes in the food. But having said that, you cannot do that immediately, right? You have to
Right.
release that particular product in the market, and then in the next build or next time, you will be allowed to do that, right? In the next version,
So
let's say. So
sorry.
which phones are you guys using? Anyone are using iPhone, Androids, right?
iPhones.
You might
Yeah.
iPhone, right? So if we talk
Hmm.
about using an iPhone, what we generally see, we primarily see is maybe iPhone 4, 5, 6, and right now we have iPhone iOS version 11, 12, 16, 17, right? That's how the iOS version comes in. In the same
Yeah.
way, there are the different versions that also comes in for the particular software as well, right? And when we release another version, we do make sure that whatever errors were found during the development and testing phase, we handle those errors in the next release or next version. That's how the software, or you can say that's how primarily the waterfall model works.
Can I just say something?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So I work in retail and we have POS systems, and we get updates daily. Not daily,
Mm-hmm,
but we often get updates. Like before, we could not print receipt from any um, printer. Before, we had to
mm-hmm,
go up to the office and print it out through their DOS system, whatever. But now we can print it from whichever register you want, right? So
right.
these are upgrades. And
Yeah.
but the product is already done. It's already a finished product. So that doesn't fall under the waterfall model, does it?
No, so these are different phases, Noreen. Again, you are going on a little wrong track. These are the
Sorry.
different no, absolutely no worry. These are the different methodologies that we are going to use, right? We have to finalize. Now, for example, let's take an example this way. For example, you have to reach to a destination, right? You have to go to a marriage, for example, right? So, where are you based out of, Noreen? If in case I may know.
I'm in Minnesota.
You're in Minnesota, right? So, for example,
Mhm.
you have to go all the way from, let's say, Minnesota to Austin. Just taking hypothetical situation, right? You are at Minnesota, you want to go to Austin. What will be the
Okay.
best way to for you to go? What
A
would be the
plane.
best way for you to commute? A plane, right? So you go ahead, boarded a plane, and then you went ahead, did some or the other analysis, and then straight away you were able to land to a plane, right? You boarded a
Mhm.
plane, you went ahead. Another way could be maybe you go either by car, you go drives, you go by bus and stuff, and then hopping and hopping, you land to Austin. Which, according
Yeah.
to you, would be the best way?
The plane would be the best way.
The plane would be the best way, right? So, what does the plane and the cycle or the bicycle came? These are nothing but the mode of transportations, right? In the same
Right.
way, waterfall model, V model, agile model, spiral model, they are nothing but the ways, the models, or you can say the mode of transportation for developing a good quality software.
Okay.
Right now, depending on whether you want to go a little early, whether you want to go little slow, you choose these different modes of development. Basis that the organization finalizes the model, and then you start your work on it. Right now, coming to
Okay.
the point of yours, whether the software is developed, right? You said the software is developed, right? It's totally
Yes.
finalized, but still you are working on some enhancements, right? Now that
Right.
particular enhancements come under your operation and maintenance phase, right? It has nothing,
Oh.
yeah, it has nothing to do with whether it's waterfall, whether it's agile, right? Which model have you used? Your organization will be able to tell you better. Maybe you can go
Right.
ahead today and ask your developers, hey, which model are we using? They might say we are working on agile. They might say we are working on incremental. They might say we are working on
I
waterfall.
understand. Yep. I
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect. So depending on their requirements or depending on the organization's requirement, we go ahead and decide and finalize what we need to work on.
Okay.
All right, are we good to close with waterfall?
Yes.
Nagina, do you have any doubts? Maybe yes, no.
No, no, yeah, it's very clear.
Perfect. Then after this came in was the incremental model. Now, what does the word incremental model means, right? Anyone who knows increment meaning of an increment, basic.
To increase, ever increasing.
Exactly. So what you can say is to increase. Absolutely right. So if you go back, incremental model is basically a process. I don't think we'll be wrapping it up, or maybe we'll try to wrap it up, right?
Oh,
Incremental model is what? It's a software development lifecycle model where the requirements are broken down into multiple standalone modules of software development. Incremental development is done in step-by-step phases like analysis, design, implementation, testing, maintenance, right? Now that's wherein the approach of increment model comes. Now this is a step ahead of waterfall. Just to give you a heads up, this one is a step ahead of waterfall. What exactly we were doing in waterfall? We were defining a big requirement and we were developing the entire set of big requirement. Yes.
yes.
Now what exactly happens in increment model? This is kind of, you can say, a total opposite of what we did in waterfall. Let's say you have this big requirement of Myntra website. For example, you have a big requirement of Myntra. Now, what does that mean? Cool, cool, cool. Let's say you have this big requirement of Myntra, and the very first thing, I'm not able to draw it. Let's keep it this way, simple, right? Two, three, four, right? Let's say this is Myntra, which you see right now.
What is Mintra?
Let's say Costco, right? Let's for you all, let's take Costco or let's take Amazon, right? Amazon
Okay.
is basically a website that everyone is aware of. For example, just consider this pink particular box as the Amazon website, right? If you all can relate it, consider this Amazon website, and in the waterfall, we had to develop the entire Amazon website, right? Just trying to understand, not able to write down what exactly can be the face. Allow me a moment if you all can see this particular screenshot. Can you see the screenshot?
Yes.
This one.
The yes requirements.
Yeah, exactly. Right. This is perfect. So if you all can see this particular screenshot, this is a good stuff for me. Allow me a moment. I'll just move it here. Now, what does the requirement particular phase or requirement says. Just understand. Increment model is a process where the software development requirements are broken down into smaller modules or multiple standalone modules. Incremental development is done from analysis, designing, implementation, testing, and maintenance phase, right? So earlier what we were doing was we were defining one big requirement and we were developing it all together. For example, Amazon, right? But now we are not developing the entire development all together. Rather, what we are doing is we are dividing that given set of requirement into small modules. Now, for example, if I talk about, let's say I have this big requirement and I can call this particular big requirement as, let's say, Amazon website or anything,
Okay.
right? Let's say I have this and I call it as Amazon website, right? Now, what I did, I divided this particular Amazon website requirements into three requirements. For example, one is login, or forget about Amazon website, or one is login. Another set of requirement I wanted to divide was, let's say, add to cart functionality. This is this one, right? And the third set of requirement that I wanted to divide was, let's say, checkout, right? So
Right.
requirement one, online login, requirement to add to cart, and then third requirement is checkout. Now what
Right.
happens in this? One big requirement got bifurcated into three. Are we all in sync?
Yes.
One big requirement got bifurcated into three. Now what does that means, or how is that useful to us?
I'm not sure what the question is.
So earlier we were developing the entire set of website altogether in the waterfall model. But right now we have divided that particular website into five different phases, and each team and we so since we divided those requirements into five different phases, team one, phase two, phase three, and phase four.
Mhm.
Right. So now what do you think is the level of complication over here? Are you still able to relate or not?
Yeah, it would be very complicated since there's three different teams for each phase, right?
This is complex, all right, but what do you think on the other side is the advantage of it? So in general, in layman terms, in iterative model, what generally happens is you divide a given set of big requirement into three or maybe five or maybe seven depending on your requirements, and we have each team member who works on those requirements, right? So we have, for example, team one. If you see this, we have team one working on these given set of requirements. We have team two who work on login logout. We have team three who work on, let's
Okay.
say, checkout, right? So team 1 has no dependency on team 2. Team 2 has no dependency on team 3, right? And each person work accordingly, each team work accordingly, being independent of each other. In this way, what we are going to achieve is we are going to achieve, let's say, point 1 very clearly, we are going to achieve logout very clearly, and we are going to achieve third model, that is the checkout, right?
Hmm.
We have achieved one, we have achieved two, we have achieved three. So all the three units have been achieved in the same amount of time, right? For example, we say we have 10 days to deliver the entire website in waterfall. But now delivering the entire website in waterfall in 10 days is very difficult. So we went ahead and we came up with an approach that, hey, why not we do the policy of divide and conquer, right? You divide the
Right.
given set of requirements into three or into five or into what is your call, assign those particular requirements to the different teams, let them work together on them independently. And once we are done with all the questions, with all the setup, what we are going to do is we are going to combine these particular set of requirements. So what generally we do is we go ahead and combine all the given set of requirements all together once they are thoroughly developed in the end,
Hmm.
right? Can you kind of relate it?
Yes.
Perfect, right? So this particular relation and iteration is basically we primarily go ahead and call as waterfall incremental model.
Incremental. Right.
Yeah, incremental model. And now what exactly happens in incremental model is if we kind of go ahead and have to decide when to use incremental model. The very first thing is you go ahead and use incremental model when the requirements are clear, right? Because if the requirements are clear, then only you will be able to develop, or maybe you can say divide the requirements into small modules, correct?
Right.
The requirements have to be very clear, then only you will be able to divide the given requirements into smaller modules. Now once the divisions are done, then only you will be able to go ahead and get the product as early as possible, right? When the software when high risk and features are involved. Third thing, now when you have the risk of not being able to deliver the website on time, what are you going to do? The best approach you find is divide and conquer. When you have any
Mhm.
complex work that you are not able to do, the best approach is divide and conquer. So you go ahead, divide the product into three stages, assign different teams to work on them, and then you are happy to go ahead, right? That's what basically the power of incremental model is, and that's what basically the power of divide and conquer policy is.
Mhm.
Right. Now after that there are certain pros and cons as well, right? As I said that things doesn't come without pros or without cons. We have certain pros and we have certain cons of it. The pros is the software will be generating quickly during the software development life cycle. Agree?
Mhm. Yes.
I believe we should, right? Why? Because we have less amount of time, we have more work done, and then we have the software that is finally ready for the market.
Right.
Second thing is it is flexible and less expensive. So we have less expensive software and it is flexible to change the requirements. Third thing is though the development stages throughout the development stages changes can be done. So this software is a little lenient in terms of waterfall. You can do certain amount of changes back and forth, right? It will not tell you anything. So this software is not that strict. This model is not that strict. You can perform the
Right.
changes when and where required,
Right.
right? So to be very honest, like as I said, to be very honest, you do not have to. Uh, all right, I'll cover this particular topic in the end.
Okay.
This model is less costly as compared to other model. Now, one thing to understand about this is that this is less costly as compared to other model. Consider the fact that where are we? Consider the fact that we are following these two approaches of this is Amazon. We are following the two approaches of delivering the software. One is using uh, let's say this particular model. Oh my god. Let's say we are following two approaches for this particular model, right? Model one we have is using waterfall, and this particular we have is using iterative. So what will happen? Coming to this particular point, the model is less expensive. Just trying to explain that. If we have any issues or any errors found in waterfall, right, we will not be able
Mhm.
to go back. That means if we are not
Right.
able to go back, what eventually will happen is there is a loss of time, there is a cost effectiveness not working around that, and then there is huge loss of money as well, right? The trust of
Right.
client also goes in vain. We are not able to get the trust of the client back again. But what will happen in iterative is, for example, let's say these are three increments, right? Increment one, two, and three, and all the
Mhm.
given set of increments are uh, my bad. And all the given set of increments are being delivered all not all together, but we are having different time that we are delivering these requirements, correct?
Right.
Let's say for example we have this particular increment one, right? Increment one will cost you, for example, 1,000 rupees.
Okay.
I'm actually not able to write something here. There you go. There we go. Right. We have increment one, we have increment two, we have increment three. Right. So now what exactly I am going to do is, let's say this particular model cost me 1,000, right? And then this particular model cost me 2,000. Then this particular cost me, let's say 5,000, right? You consider a dollars, INR, any currency, right? 1,000 is always greater than 2,000, greater than 1,000, 5,000 greater than 2,000, right? So
Of
now what
course.
happens in the end is, if in case this particular model fails, right? This is a
Yeah.
success, this is a success, right? For example, we are not able to deliver this particular model, this particular model fails, right? This increment fails, and we are successfully able to deliver the increment model 2 and increment 3. What does that means? We are only and only having a loss of 1,000 rupees because this particular iteration didn't work well for us, right? However, our 2,000 and our 5,000 are saved because development team for 2,000 and 5,000 was different, correct?
Right.
Because this is not dependent on this and this is not dependent on this. So that's what exactly it says, that this model is less costly as compared to other. Had it been waterfall, all and all amount would have been lost, right? Because you are not delivering things differently or in a different fashion, but you are combining them all together and then delivering,
Right.
correct? The same way
Yes.
what we have is the cons, right? It require good planning and designing. Definitely it will require good planning, because if the requirements are not divided in a well mannered, team will not be able to work on them as and when required, correct? So good planning is definitely required for using this model. Problem might cause the system architecture as the requirements are not collected upfront for the entire life cycle. It will cause a problem if the requirements are not clear, not collected properly, then it might cause some issues. Right.
Okay.
The third thing is rectifying a problem into one might take a lot of time and consumes in all. So what exactly happens is when all the three are done, right? When you do increment 1, 2, and 3, what we basically do is we do a summation of all the increments, right? We do what? We do a summation of all the increments. Let's say summation 1, 2, 3, and this is the product. Because we have not div you know made or developed the entire software into one shot, we have developed the entire software into three shots: shot 1, shot 2, shot 3. So once shot 1 is done, we release it. Shot 2 is done, we release it. Shot 3 is done, we release it. And if we want to release the end-to-end product, we do a submission of increment 1, 2, and 3. Then we release the entire product in the market depending on the client requirements,
Okay.
right? Any doubts so far?
I'm still not understanding what the cons are.
You're still not understanding what the cons are. All right. So
Hmm.
just let's keep it very simple. This model has pros. Pros are already clear. If I talk about the
Yes.
cons, just focus on the two negatives of this. One is a
Okay.
requirement should be clear, right? You cannot go ahead and use for a complex requirements,
Okay.
because if the requirements are complex and you are not able to divide it properly, then definitely it will lead to the development of a wrong product, right?
Right.
Second con that you need to understand is that it requires a good planning. Definitely, it requires a good planning. Third thing is we are merging all the given set of requirements all together, right? We are merging increment 1, 2, and 3 in the end. So, for example,
Right.
if any problem comes in increment 2, don't you think that it will impact the entire software?
Of course.
Right, so that's what the problem is. If there are certain issues in increment 2, it will be impacting the entire software, right? Because part 1, 2, and 3 both are going to be connected all together. Data will be flowing
Mhm.
from part 1 to part 2 and then from part 2 to part 3. So if the part 2 is malfunction, you will have to perform the fixes around everywhere, right? That's what basically this particular model states.
Okay.